Hello and welcome to this deep dive into the hugely successful BBC drama The Tourist. I'm Rhianna Dillon and I'm in conversation with the star of The Tourist, Jamie Dornan, and director Chris Sweeney. Hello, welcome to you both.
Hi.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for coming on. I can't believe it's been almost a year since the show was released, and it was prestige television at its best. I mean, clearly a big budget show, but in the first month, 12 million people watched this in the first month. I can't get my head around those figures. Can you reflect on the response at the time, Chris?
12 million, that's like an EastEnders cliffhanger level, isn't it?
A Christmas EastEnders cliffhanger, exactly.
That's Cat Spencer finding out she was his mum or whatever.
I think she knew.
It was, she knew, the daughter didn't know, that was it. It's really good. You know, like you try and make things good and it doesn't always work out. So if people respond well, it's lovely. Right, Jamie?
Yeah. I think I've learned to just, not try to get yourself all in a tizzy about how things are going to perform or, numbers and ratings and reviews and stuff. Because it's always such a mixed bag, and some stuff you think is going to be received well isn't, and vice versa, whatever. So it's always a nice surprise when, you're not pinning too much on it just as a rule, and then it becomes a thing that people want to watch. And so I was amazed by how many people, because it's also a quirky, tonally slightly off kilter show, so there is a bit of a fear of like, Jesus, this might not be for everyone, but luckily it was for 12 million weirdos.
Chris, you've known Harry and Jack Williams, the writers, the founders of Two Brothers Productions, since you were all kids, right? Which is incredible. So you know their work really, really well, and vice versa. What do you love about bringing their stories to life?
I went to school with them, and they're both really funny. And then they, have this reputation for being like the masters of thrillers. Mm-hmm. And what I really liked about this is it was kind of felt like it combined the two. It was really funny and weird when I read it, but it was also really thrilling. And I loved that they'd struck that mix so beautifully.
And Jamie, the first time you read the script, which scenes specifically stood out for you? Was there any episode or any scene that you thought, I just can't wait to film that?
I think I just got the first two where, I said yes after reading the first two. I didn't actually know what happened at the end until, deep into Australia.
Really?
Time. Yeah, it's kind of really weird. Like I discussed it with the powers that be, and I had an idea, but I felt that changed somewhat sometimes. I was pretty gripped from the opening, I've got to be honest, like right from that chase at the beginning and the sort of weirdness of sort of singing Betty Davis Eyes and that sort of that sense of isolation and loneliness that they created right from the beginning of this vast landscape and this person in this tiny car. And just there's instantly questions that I had. So I was into it very quickly, and there was humor in it very quickly with the petrol station and the key and all that. That all happens very quick, and I was, I think probably whether I knew it or not, was looking to do something that was a bit all encompassing. And I'd done a big silly comedy movie before, and I'd loved it. But obviously I'd be more known for being doing more drama and stuff, so it just, as Chris said earlier, sort of merged the two, and it just felt like a perfect fit for me.
Was that Barb and Star
you're
talking about? Yes, that was so good. It was so brilliant seeing you in a comedy role. So you've teased this. Let's have a look at our first clip, which is our introduction to Elliot, or the man, I guess, as we know him here. She's got better Davis eyes. She'll tease you, she'll ease you, all the better just to please you. She's precocious, and she knows just what it takes to make So yeah, let's talk about this scene. Before the crash, you're singing along to Betty Davis Eyes. It's such a nice introduction to Elliot before he loses his memory. So can you talk about why that song specifically worked for that scene? Maybe Chris, you can start us off, and then Jamie, you can talk about your memories of filming it.
The Betty Davis Eyes song was an example of what it was chosen because it was a song that we all know, but actually isn't like, oh, that's from that show. Like,
Yes.
you know, and it's actually quite hard to find those songs that haven't turned up in Stranger Things, but are like things that you love when you hear it. And, you know, Jamie would have done Running Up That Hill beautifully, by the way, but
too tough.
But it just felt like we all just got really excited about it. And then, you know, it's meant to be strange and funny, which I think is always semi-terrifying as a concept, because it's like, how do you make things strange and funny? And it was actually Jamie's idea of like him trying to hit slightly too high, because we hadn't discussed it that much. We were just like, because over dissection can be annoying. So then on the day, we were just trying things, and Jamie sort of said, well, what if he's trying to go too high and sort of trying to stay up there? And that felt like we all do that, because you kind of commit to a song, forgetting bits about it, and then suddenly you're up here in karaoke and you're like, how long am I up here for? It's going up and up. And so it felt really real. And I thought Jamie did that brilliantly.
Jamie, like it is brilliant. And also the idea of, you know, think about behind the scenes, having a camera right here where you're doing something that most of us do very, very privately.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of nice because I was on the back of a rig, you know, there's a truck in front of me, but there might have been a sound guy. Who's that sound guy at the boom at Travis?
Oh.
He might have been down on the floor behind me. I can't quite remember, but I think he maybe wasn't even, and there's just rigged up microphones. So you do feel like you are by yourself, and hopefully if you've been doing it this long, you're not put off by a big honking camera right in front of your face. So you can convince yourself that you're sort of alone on the road with your thoughts. And I remember doing it a couple of times, sort of trying to sing it like well in a normal register, and then just knowing it wasn't hitting, and I just knew it wasn't funny.
Mm-hmm.
I think I could see Chris at the monitor, and there was no like shoulder shrug or anything. I was like, this isn't funny at all. And then so I said, can I do one where I'm really reaching for the high notes and basically unable to get there? So but it's a great song too. You know, it's a really it is the exact sort of song that you go for when it comes on.
And also don't know all the words to, which I think was even more genius.
Exactly. Yeah.
But do you also remember, Jamie, that on that day, it was one of our very first days.
Yeah.
And whenever there was like, I could speak into a walkie-talkie that would go into Jamie's ear or somewhere in the car that Jamie was in. But for whatever technical reason, when I spoke, my own voice would come back to me and with a 2-second delay. And that just melted my head. Like I'd be like, so anyway, and it was like, what is going on? So we eventually just kind of had to be like, and I knew I was being really annoying. I was like, what an annoying thing to try and get instructions from someone who keeps slurring because they're trying to speak over their own voice. So we kind of just went, let's just, you do it. We'll talk. We'll talk at lunch.
Love that. And that's interesting, Jamie, that you were saying about, Chris, you were saying that you don't like to over dissect scenes. So were there any scenes that you just sort of let your actors completely free rein without any?
Oh, no. Yeah, I think Jamie would probably say I do over dissect or I dissect things a lot. Like, but when it's funny, I think you have to not. That's my thing. But I think sometimes when it's like you're trying to get people to feel a certain way, I do love to talk about it tons before, because then on the day we've had all the conversations and then the person can just come up with what they have digested and they think is best. And you can objectively go, I'm imagining I'm watching television at home and that feels great, rather than like, what is this about? Does anyone remember? You know?
The humor is, as we've touched upon, kind of all the way through, which is not what you expect in a thriller. Where does the comedy really stand out for you, Jamie?
So much of it was in the casting of the smaller roles.
Yeah.
And they cast so many of these sort of Australian comedians who actually hadn't even done that much acting or done very little, who were just had funny bones, and and actually all play quite vital parts to the story. So it felt like almost every day you were dealing with some sort of quite quirky Aussie person who's coming in to do a number for a day or two.
Yeah.
And I think that just added, and a lot of these, because they're, they might have a bit of a name in Australia or whatever, but they're not sort of known over here in the States. So I think that really helped when people watching it going like, it's just they didn't, it's not the usual people you see on BBC dramas or whatever. And that just added to the sort of whole slightly discombobulation of the story that was being told. Like, I don't even recognize these people and they're being really weird. So I think a lot of the success for the humor of it lay in that. And I think in tragic moments, in moments of despair, you're so close to laughing off, like I've found in my life, and I think as people, and particularly I think where I come from, people are very like this, where you're always treading that line between crying and laughing, and a lot of that was just built into the script anyway, in the story, and Shalom and Danielle, Damon, they're all funny people. So a lot of that, I felt like no matter who I was doing a scene with, they were up for the same sort of putting the same energy in. And I think, like, on Chris's point, like, sometimes you did need to sort of be reminded about the story aspect of what we were trying to get across here. And as much as we were, like, maybe Danielle and I were trying to sort of riff off each other and, make it weird and funny, and you've got to hit the points. You've got to, it's great. You can't just have the audience go, they were great, and what happened? Like, what, they've got to know, they've got to carry people through the story.
Yes.
So you needed a bit of, Chris coming and spoiling the fun.
Well, we made sure that happened. But also, I think what was really one of the things the reason I wanted to do this show is because it was a man in a very normal, a man in a very extraordinary situation, but how it kind of played out for him was quite normal. So if he was in a thriller, traditionally, if you were trying to find someone who's buried somewhere, like, you'd run and you'd like jump over a car, and then you'd find someone who's like, tell me where this thing is, and they would tell you immediately. Whereas in this, like, he goes to speak to two guys to ask them a question. It's really important, and they're just playing chess, and they won't answer him until they stop playing chess. And it was all that kind of real life rubbing up against thriller was what was really good. But that's actually a really tricky thing to do, and I think Jamie did it brilliantly, because you made it funny when it needs to be funny, but then it was also like, we also were invested in the fact that it still needed to all be happening. It's tricky. You're trying to do two things at the same time, and that can be in the wrong hands, that can just go terribly.
Well, let's see another instance of that then. This is the clip where we see a bit more from Elliot before everything goes south, and this is an interaction with another quirky Australian character.
Do you have a toilet that I could use?
You need to sign for it.
Need to what?
Sign for it.
No, it's hardly like I want to buy it.
Well, toilets and building out the back. So most people, they take the key, they walk out, and then they forget to bring it back. And then they drive God knows where with it. So.
Okay, so how does signing for it actually help? Because I can still sign for it and then still take the key away and forget.
Out the front, round the back.
So, Jamie, how open were Harry and Jack to changes to Elliot's character? Did you want to make any? Because Danielle said that they were weirdly good at writing things from the perspective of an Australian woman. What about an Irish man?
Yeah, Harry's wife is Irish, so genuinely that sort of thing helps, you know. And she's from the north as well, like you know. So, I think originally, the character wasn't Irish, but I think originally what probably was written as maybe an English character or whatever, and then, you know, all their top choice English actors said no.
Fools, all of them.
By the time it came around to me, they're like, Jesus. And then because I guess they haven't fully finished writing, you know, certainly episodes 5 and 6 until, you know, we're definitely out there, they're probably writing to me a bit more. But like, Jack and Harry weren't able to be in Australia with us the whole time. You've got to remember, this is bang in the middle of COVID. Like, there was a lot of leniency when it came to changing things or making things suit my rhythm or my voice a bit. Like, there's the old time I'd be like, can I say tiny things, you know, but that just makes sense for me. And they were really open to that. But I felt very comfortable with what was on the page anyway. You know, there was rarely a moment where I was like, I can't get my head around saying that in this moment, you know. So that was proof of sort of good writing.
Mm-hmm. Chris, obviously, Jack and Harry did set out to write a show which wouldn't adhere to any one genre. How did you try and reflect that in your filming techniques? Are there shots that you would usually associate with one genre over another, for instance?
We just tried to try not to do too many things at once. So if we're being funny, we just try to be funny. And then if we're trying to be thrilling, we'd just be thrilling rather than like, how do I make this funny thrilling? You know, and then it actually keeps it really simple, and people don't seem to mind that you're sort of quite often changing styles, because humor is a bit looser, whereas thrillers are a bit more like cutty and all of that. And so that was just a big old guess, but it seemed all right. And so, yeah, but then it was like also paying homage to people like the Coen brothers and people who do brilliant hostile landscapes and things that feel like they could be any time, any place. Like, you know, is this period? Is it not? You know, I really wanted it to feel kind of timeless. So like the cars are old, but then the phones are new, you know, like it just is a bit more cinematic, I suppose.
It is really intangible, and you sort of don't necessarily realize that until you're a little way in, because I don't know, maybe there's an assumption that in the bush, the tech isn't going to be really up to scratch. So in terms of things like the color palette, what else did you use to make sure that we never quite knew where we were?
Well, they all used to take the piss out of me, and this wall behind me doesn't help, because they were just like, you only want things that are brown. And I'd be like,
it's a brown room.
I was like, red is all right as well, you know. It is a bit brown, if I'm honest. There you go, it's a bit green there. And yeah, I just, I don't know how, if it felt kind of timeless and anytime, any place, I felt like you would probably just buy into the world a bit more, and all the weird things would feel more realistic in a way. You believe it. And that was sort of the intention.
You called it hostile. What were the challenges of filming in a country that you just don't know, or at least challenges that you weren't necessarily expecting?
Well, what's funny is that so Australia's, you know, so many huge expanses of miles and miles of nothing, and a lot of our locations were written as like a gas station in the middle of nowhere, a ... in the middle of nowhere. But as soon as you kind of get on the ground, everyone's quite clear about they don't do gas stations in the middle of nowhere, because they get one customer a month. So all the gas stations are in town. So we spent weeks looking for a gas station in the middle of nowhere, and then we ended up having to build it because things to visually look the way we wanted, i.e. isolated, meant that everything had to be built. So that was like a challenge. And also everything's just really far apart. Like 2-hour drive is nothing to everybody there, you know. And you know, we get annoyed if we have to go on the tube for more than half an hour.
It's true. Jamie, as
the authenticity of that petrol station, remember, like there was some people pulling up to get fuel, like random people.
Yeah, the gas station. Yeah, we built that gas station at the beginning, and people used to stop there all the time to try.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you think about just providing it for them anyway as like a side hustle?
I was like,
We filled a couple up with water and took the cash.
sent them on their merry way.
Yeah, we're not proud of it, but it was funny at the time.
Yeah, we saw them a few weeks later, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I mean, we did talk about like maybe we set this up as a business. This could be our retirement plan, but
the whole one customer a month thing is
Wouldn't be great.
you played out the numbers. It wasn't stacking up.
No.
As two people who are not Australian, Jamie, what were some of the differences you noticed about working on an Aussie production compared to a UK set?
They're very relaxed people, Australians.
Right.
I actually find them quite like the Irish. They're very quick with a joke. They don't take themselves too seriously. They are quite sort of loose and sort of like a drink, and it's quite like sort of matey and relaxed. Yeah, it's very sociable. It feels, and it was helped by so much of it was on location, and usually on a predominantly a location shoot, the camaraderie is better because you're all sort of out in the middle of nowhere together and mucking in to make stuff happen and dealing with the elements and stuck in these small little towns where you're all going out for drinks and dinner together every night. It's just it's sort of a galvanizing environment compared to in a studio where you're like, ooh, everyone has to be quiet, and it's a different thing. And it was a brilliant crew, wasn't it? I mean, it was. We had a real laugh, and I think so fondly of so many of those people, and I've kept in touch with a lot of the crew. You follow them on Instagram and then think, well, I'll unfollow them as soon as I get in the plane. But then you're like, no, I actually like these people. No, genuinely, like just a great bunch. And it was not an easy shoot. It was tough, and we were out there for 5 months, a long way from home, and I dragged my whole family out there, and it was thank God it was such a welcoming, open-hearted, fun group of people that you got to go to work with 6 days a week most of the time. So it was a lot of work, but yeah, great bunch. I'd love to shoot out there again.
Interesting. Chris, from a kind of technology perspective, or at least kind of battling the elements, how was it for you?
The crew was so great, and we did have such a laugh, like such a nice bunch. And I'm trying to think of a good. So there was one time when we had a dust storm while we were filming.
Oh yes.
And everyone had to like hide in a car and wait for it to pass, and that was like, it was Jamie's birthday actually. So it was like, let's try and get the day done. So you can go and do some birthday things, and then like on the horizon, this huge dust storm just started coming in, and it was like, probably pass, won't it? It won't be long, and then it just like enveloped the whole set, and it was, that was that. And then Jamie and Danielle had to do the scene that we'd originally planned 3 hours to film in literally 20 minutes while the sun was going down, and flies were all over their face. It was
the dust storm had like sort of unsettled the flies or something, because the dust storm had passed, and we're like, oh my god, thank God. Well, we've got 40 minutes of light. So we had planned 3 or 4 hours of the scene, but like we'll get through it. Like it was relentless. I don't know how much money you guys spent photoshopping flies out of our eyes or mouths or up our noses. It was insane. But actually the scene worked quite well.
The scene was great, and actually, that's testament to you two, because they were in their eyes, because when it's so dry, your eyes are what flies want, because that's the only source of water.
Oh my god, that's
they go like this.
Horrible thought, isn't it?
Yeah. And then we were like, we had 20 minutes, the sun was going down, and it was, I was just watching on the monitor being like, I think I can see Danielle's face, it's mainly flies, but
but also that was Danielle and I at that point, because it was very top heavy for me. I mean, the whole schedule was heavy for me, but Danielle had a very light beginning to the shoot. Remember, she only worked a couple of days and then had quite a lot of time off. And it was very like Shalom and I at the beginning. But so Danielle and I had only done one tiny scene together in a car where I think we literally had a line each. And then that was the second scene we were doing together. It was one of our biggest scenes together. It was against the elements. It was all this stuff. And I mean, thank God she's such a dream to work with to get us through that madness of trying to shoot that scene in that amount of time.
I sort of feel like you've set it up so well that we should take a look at it and just see if we can spot any flies on any of your faces. So this is the bit, right, where Elliot kidnaps Helen?
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look.
Elliot Stanley.
Helen Chambers.
Yeah.
Right. You know, I didn't have you pegged for an Elliot.
No, what did you think?
I don't know, maybe Steve? Or like Orion.
Ryan, really? Jesus, no.
Hey, listen, you could be Orion.
No.
All units, KLO4, Northern Irish male, mid to late 30s, tall, dark brown hair, name unknown. Suspect says he's lost his memory. It's in connection to a murder out of Murray Waters, so be careful.
Just gonna go.
I can't let you do that.
That's not me. They're talking about your wee radio. That's not.
You can explain
That's
that.
not me.
At the station.
I didn't kill anyone. I don't think.
Like I say, it's not my job. Just come down to the station, explain to the bigwigs, and they'll clear this all up.
Okay. Sure.
Okay then. Look, sorry about this, but I'm gonna have to cuff you.
There's no need for that.
It's procedure.
Okay. Here we go.
Hey!
I love the relationship between Elliot and Helen, and I think so many people fell in love with Helen. Why do you think that she resonated so much with audiences, Chris?
Well, one of the reasons we loved Danielle is that she, you know, she has this sort of humanity about her, for want of a better description. You just somehow are in her world whenever she's on screen. And I think that we all feel that we could do something, but we're too scared. And if you believe in yourself, you can do it. And I think that's what she goes through in the story. And I love stories like that, you know, and I think underdog stories, people love them. And she, you know, she gets to this place where she sticks up for herself against her horrible boyfriend. And she just did it beautifully. She just did it so well. I think that's what I think people loved about her.
Tell me about working with Danielle, Jamie, because I think that I think she said herself that she takes it very seriously. She likes to run lines extensively. Was that right?
Yeah, I remember feeling that she was taking it more seriously than anyone else. You know, I mean, we're all...
Didn't mean to imply that you weren't, by the way, there.
No.
There's something about phoning it in or something. I can't remember the word.
Has the money gone into my account yet? So I've been set for like 20 minutes. No, you know, you get to a certain level, and I guess in this game, and you're all have a certain amount of professionalism, and but I think if you know, you back yourself and you believe in yourself, that you actually have done all the work, and then it's time to have fun. And I feel like we were all in that place with it. You know, there's so much work to do. You know, I mean, for 3 or 4 of us, certainly, I had so much, you know, intense subject matter to deal with, and a lot of lies and everything. So, but I think we were all approached in a similar way, where we're all turned up set, having done the work, feeling confident, and then actually you do all that work then so that you just forget all about it and have fun. And I feel like we were all in that place, and just easy. I mean, those girls, like, also like Shalom and Danielle were, how close were they? They were so close. I mean, they actually didn't even have that many scenes together or anything.
No.
But they were just like sisters, weren't they? I mean, it was so lovely seeing their relationship. I just couldn't have landed on my feet more with the pair of them. Both just so easy, so genuinely good, so funny, so willing to play around with the stuff, improvise when necessary. We all just felt like we were always playing the same game, you know. There was no like, if I throw the ball to her, I don't really trust her to catch it. It was all very much like, yeah, like, you know what I mean? We're all playing the same game, and that's you take a real comfort from that, and I think you do your best work.
I want to show you one of the most iconic moments of the series, and then we can talk about how that was done. So this is the man escaping the truck, but only for a short time. So opening the series with a huge car crash was such an immense way of getting your audience's attention. It was an incredibly tense scene. Tell us about creating that, filming something on that scale, what that looked like, Chris.
It took a long time, in many different parts. Basically, the idea was like, because I actually have never directed action sequences before, and my brain slightly switches off when I watch them. So I was like, how can I make this interesting in a way that I would watch? And I was like, well, why don't you just make it all about being with him for it? So you kind of glue the camera to his face and experience it as he would. So that was the idea. And then it took 2 weeks to do it. But it was like trying to show the expanse of the space that he's in. Mm-hmm. So we had this drone that flew around filming like the truck and the car with stunt drivers. But then when the car crash happens, Jamie was in a car which was on a bouncing rig that like threw him up. So it's not green screen. It was done on location with a truck that was driving, Jamie in a car with a bouncy rig on it. And then at a certain point, this rig went boom and flung Jamie in the car through the air. Oh my God. And then that was spliced with a stuntman doing the bit that rolled down the hill. Oh, yeah. But it was a lot for Jamie to do. Like it was really violent, wasn't it, Jamie?
It was a lot of different stunt people who looked exactly like me wearing that same sort of maroon t-shirt, black jeans, like the man, lots of the men walking around. And there's a couple of rigs where, they did have a violence to it, I have to admit, but they needed that to have something. And then there's another rig that literally stayed still and just like moved around like really violently. And I was in that for a while. That wasn't on wheels. I mean, there's lots of different. We did so many different ways, didn't we? And I think, thank God we did, because it just adds to the whole experience of watching that moment. The toughest bit was when we went out for like a test run or whatever. And said, this is the pace the car is going to be at, and won't go any faster than this. And do you feel comfortable? Blah blah. And I was like, yeah, and it was fine. And then I don't know what happened, because then we went to shoot one. Something opened the bottom of the car. So I remember it was just filling up with dust. I'm driving around, and we're going quite fast through this, desert landscape, and I'm it's just like filling the car and my lungs with like red dust. It was massively unpleasant, but I didn't want it. It was also really early on. Yeah, I remember I got a bit of grit in my eye, and that ended the day pretty quick. But I was also trying to be like don't complain. It's like day 2. Like, you're fine. Your lungs will recover. You're okay.
You don't need your lungs.
And then a bit of stone went in my eye, and I was like, I'm done.
A very brief encounter of you. We kind of find out eventually that Elliot's not really an action guy. He's an accountant, but he gets injured a lot and he has to keep fighting really hard, trying to survive. Can you tell us about the stunt work involved in this to ensure that Elliot sort of reacts like a normal person and not like Sylvester Stallone and not like, your average action man?
Oh, but hang on, that's what you were going for. He does.
I think just put me in there, and I react like an accountant.
There's a very funny bit where Elliot has to jump over a fence, and I said to Jamie, like, let's make it like he can't get over the fence, and it takes a lot of like confidence and humility to do that and do it well and not. And I just thought you did that so brilliantly. It was so funny because it was like, that is what it would be like if you're trying to run away from something and you're surprised by a fence. You're like, it was great.
Yeah. I think I had a second of going, well, I could just leap over that fence with that, because I sort of backed myself as athletically, and then I said, I also think there's that constant thing that you and I were always talking about. It was like, do I still have the limp? Am I limping?
The limp.
It's just constantly. I was like, are the audience going to be okay that I'm not really limping anymore? And I was limping, after the accident, whatever.
Yeah. You were very team limp, and I was team get rid of the limp.
Yeah,
where did you end up?
And I think, somewhere in the middle. I think that's what allowed me to agree with Chris with the fence hop being an awkward thing, because I was like, I worked the sort of limp into. I don't know.
I wish we had that clip to play right now. You have mentioned her. We haven't properly talked about Shalon Brune Franklin, who plays Lucy. So let's watch this brilliant little clip of what holds up traffic in Australia, and then you could talk us through what exactly is happening in this scene.
Yep. Fuck this.
I don't know what you think you're going to achieve.
Movement? Progress? Who knows?
What is he doing? Mate? What the hell?
These guys are endangered. Gotta let nature take its course. Hey, some things are more important than your plans for the day, my friend. These two must have got all the way out here from someone's backyard. Now look at them. Life happens. You gotta let it.
Whoa. Hey! Hey, come on.
Move it.
Okay. Hey.
I'm not wasting any more time.
So are those really two turtles mating, Chris?
Well, I think they're tortoises, but much discussion because you can't get tortoises in the outback, which I said, I don't think that matters. It's just meant to be silly. And everyone said, but you can't get tortoises in the outback. And it went on for months. Anyway, we did do it, but no, they're not real. There were plastic ones that were put there so everyone could look at them. And then they're CGI. But they're really good CGI, aren't they? So they don't look real. So they look real.
Oh. Wait, so because is that why you've got the line in about how they've escaped from somebody's backyard because they weren't native?
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
See.
That was the compromise. And
that was another very heavy fly day. Remember, that was the worst fly day.
Fly Central. Oh. And then we had this beautiful vintage car that had been rented, but on the proviso that we didn't break it. And then Jamie's thing was that he had to slam that guy up against the car. And we were like, slam him, but don't break the car, which obviously is an annoying thing to be asked to do. Like the second take, he slams him up against the car and the wing mirror just went smash. I was like, damn. And Alice, who'd rented the car, came over and was like, what's happened? I was like, I have no idea. I'm so sorry. I wasn't here. I was somewhere else. But Shalom, you know, that's one of their bigger scenes leading up to that moment. You know, Shalom was amazing. She had a very different task to Jamie, but equally as tricky in the sense that she had to be inscrutable. We had to wonder who she was, and to play that believably and to take people this way and that way and this way and that way and keep people guessing is really, really hard. And to give her like a, you know, I always wanted Lucy to be this someone who felt a bit kind of like they could fly off the handle any second, like there's something more going on, like behaving very normally, but she kind of could be crazy. And she just did it beautifully.
There's a scene that I've rewatched a lot because I just find it so impressive, and it's the shootout in the house. Is it Ralph who unfortunately loses his life in that scene, but in quite a beautiful way? I don't know, logistically, it just seems like it would have been an absolute nightmare to film because it's such a claustrophobic environment. Can you talk us through the setup of that and also having to choreograph fight scenes and stunts within this really small environment?
Well, again, I'd never done it before.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
even more impressive.
Let's watch a bit of Bond, see how they do it. And there was something I watched, something where someone shot someone. It was sort of like meant to be immersive again, was the idea. I was like, and also let's try and make it kind of funny, like full of personality and not too like splashy thriller. And like try and make it like whose story are we following here? Like someone said to me some point, like an action sequence is like, I can't remember, it's something like an action sequence is like a song in a musical or something. Like it's sort of where you get more information about someone or something. So I was like, oh, okay, well, what's going on for Elliot in this scene? And it's kind of an interplay between him and Helen. So let's have those two communicating throughout it. And also like, try and make it really not pull any punches on what you see. So you see Ralph be like blown against the wall. But that was all built in a studio, mainly. There was some bits shot outside on location, but it was really intensely complex to plan, and we shot it for days and days, didn't we, Jamie? I wasn't even there for some of it. You have the stunt second unit.
That felt like the longest scene. I mean, and actually when you thought you're done with it, like you'd look at the schedule and like the next day it just like suddenly there'd be a part of that scene back on the schedule.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, just 1/8 of a page still to do in that scene. I'm like, what? I mean,
it was.
What possibly could you have to cover that scene? I just crawled around in like sugar glass for days. And I'm a very fiddly person, and I actually had quite a lot of time, just a lot of fun, just like picking up bits of sugar glass and like I sort of like the feel of just breaking it up in my hands and just letting it sprinkle on the floor.
Listen, you're on the floor for 4 days. You got to do something.
Yeah, exactly. I was in my element in there, just mucking about.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Another one that I always wonder about when you're asked to act drunk or high, like that must be quite a difficult thing, because presumably when you are drunk, let's say, then you don't know how you act. So can you talk about kind of creating those, I don't know, like the psychedelic scenes, and also when you're getting drunk with Danielle, with Helen, tell us about the kind of direction you were getting, maybe from Chris, whoever, about how to act in those scenes.
I actually felt like a lot of that was second block. So actually Chris was back home in his bed,
Lucky Chris.
you know, wondering whatever happened to Jamie Gillan. So, but still sort of exec producing from afar.
Lots of
But I felt like
texts. More drunk. Do it more drunk.
I think. No, listen. I'm not a sloppy drunk myself. Like I'm never, you know, I'm never like just that's not how I get when I drink. If anything, I become more kind of like focused and. You know, I'm silly and stuff, but I'm not a slurry drunk. But that doesn't work in TV and film. Usually, you need to act drunk, play drunk. So you know, I've done it a few times before, and you know, you just find something that is. You're also dealing with this thing. You're trying to find something that is believable and is funny, but not so sort of off-puttingly falling over-y that it's not telling the story. You know. So I guess you just kind of find it and hope that you're doing it right. The acid trip thing was just mad. What can I say here about the previous experience?
That's why I very carefully said not about that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. You know, bit of internet research about how people are when they're high. That got me through. But, you know, there were such spaced out mad situations anyway. I mean, the guy's high and then he's trying to like find where something's buried, and he's like at like a you know, these like in the middle of nowhere, and there's these stones. I mean, it was all kind of like trippy anyway, just the environment he was in. So you just sort of ham that up, you know, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. That episode 5 was a mad experience, just like putting that together, and you know, and it was genuinely a sort of, we created this sense of like confusion just on set anyway, because I'm going through one door and I'm opening another, and I'm wearing a different thing, and someone else is different in there, and it was sort of stressing me out, to be honest. Actually, a lot of it was kind of really peculiar anyway, so you could just sort of filter that into the, you know, the performance or whatever. But it was a lot of fun. It's asking a lot of an audience to spend an hour with someone who's on an acid trip, who is experiencing things the way that they are, you know. But also you're getting so much story in that episode. You're getting so many answers, questions answered, and yeah, it was fun.
It was incredibly satisfying to watch, actually. But for you, I don't know, maybe this is completely irrelevant, but when you're acting in scenes, obviously you're not filming everything in the right order. So there are some scenes where you have more knowledge as your character than others. So do you kind of try and keep track of everything like that in your head, or you just kind of have to let that go?
I think it's just really hard. I've never had to work like that before. There's much more ambiguity with another character I've played before who had lost his memory. It was like, is he manipulating the situation? Has he actually lost his memory? But I think for Elliot, it was pretty definitive that he had. So it's a different experience trying to kind of make yourself believe that you are finding out this information at the same time as the audience. But I actually loved that as a exercise of like, you could play everything with total sort of like newness, I don't know, and discovery, and with, you know, and usually there's an intention and there's a reason behind all your actions, but actually this guy's just been given information that is totally rocking him around the place with what he's been discovering about himself and his past. And I was like, it's a strange thing to try to keep yourself in this place of like, anything could be said here, and it's almost like you're trying to unlearn stuff. Honestly, it was like the weirdest experience trying to get your head around acting that, you know, that sort of sense of discovery. But hopefully I got away with
it. Before we wrap up, Chris, is there going to be a season 2 with Elliot?
There is going to be a season 2, right?
I don't know. Like, I mean, I know that there's lots of people talking, and you know, I think even in the fact that there's a desire for it and a want for it is a great thing. It's just a matter of trying to piece that together and work out how that works, when it happens, where it happens, who it happens with. You know, that's the potentially very exciting bit.
Much better answer.
I can't wait. It's going to be brilliant. Chris and Jamie, thank you so much for joining us to talk all about The Tourist, which is still on iPlayer, so people can go back and relive it in all its fly-laden glory.
Thanks.
Brianna,
Thank you so much. Cheers, guys.
Thank you very much.